then our communities have got more than 2. So definitely we have that happening in our communities. I hope it happens in more centers and that it's a regular thing, because this is not something that we can have one session and expect all the explanations to be put across and for everyone to be able to get the numbers down and to contact. This is going to be material that will take time for it to register. So we need to have multiple sessions, I believe. And inshallah, I hope that happens. So I thank both previous presenters for the very valuable information that was provided. There's really a storm of ideas in my head about addressing things from a religious perspective on not just what was said, but my experience with this topic and people who have reached out to me and I am dealing with currently. One of them, I'll start with this, one of the recent ones, was a text message that was sent to me that this is what you are destroying. I'm being blamed for destroying a relationship, whereas the person who has caused that abuse and has been given a chance to correct their behavior and has chosen not to, is blaming a person who is religiously helping a sister get out of that religious bond, marriage, is being accused of being the one who is breaking a relationship. No, you are breaking the relationship, not me. I'm helping someone who needs help. Anyhow, so there's a lot that was resonating when I was hearing the presentation. I want to just touch on a couple of topics very briefly. I think both presenters mentioned that really the reason for domestic abuse, because when we say violence, if you check the dictionary, it really doesn't include verbal abuse, it doesn't include emotional abuse, mental abuse. So I think I would prefer the word abuse instead of violence, because our minds just suddenly go with violence, and I think what triggered this was a case of violence, and it does reach that level. And when I heard the details of that case, it's just unimaginable for me for someone within our community to do something like that. Unfortunately, it does happen. So abuse, the reason for it is power and control. Okay. There's, again, a few ideas that come to mind. I have to choose in this one session that we have. One general thought that we have in the Quran, and this is for us, some of the information that we had there was to prevent, right? Education to prevent. This is part of that. The Quran tells us that Jannah is for people that لا يريدون علوا في الأرض. People who do not want to be above anyone else on earth. Okay. Any inclination, any desire to be above someone else is a non-divine feeling that needs to be addressed. I need to address that in myself. And if instead of addressing that, I allow it to grow in me and I want to work toward being seen as better than others, again, there's various Quranic references for that. That's where we start moving in the wrong direction. This is one thing, taqwa. If we are seeing Allah, we're a religious community, we mention God plenty of times. All the resources that are outside, those are after things happen. And they need to be there. They definitely need to be there, and I encourage for people who think they might be needing that to investigate, as it was mentioned. Don't feel that this is something that we shouldn't do religiously, it's bad, or things like that. That's not the case. I'll get to that. But before it gets to that, if we address this in ourselves, men and women, brothers and sisters, we move toward this. We start addressing the root cause in us. Most of the examples that were mentioned were intimate relationship, husband, wife, at least in our community, men and women in a marriage. But sometimes it's a parent with a child. When the parent wants to feel above the child. they use methods to control the child. It stems from the want and desire to have power over and control. The Quran is against that. In the verse that I recited, I hope that you all refer to it. It says, لا يريدون علوا. It's nakira. Okay, nakira in siyaq al-nafi. Okay, when you're denying something and then it's nakira, it means any form. Any form of ulu in Arab is just wrong. Okay. Anyone that has any bit of that is not going to enter paradise. That's one thing, one of the references for that. I want to go up to the next point, and I'm sorry I didn't have a presentation prepared. I'm not very good with that, so I'll just shoot my ideas. One of the problems that we have in the religious community is sometimes religious teachings encourage abuse, or they encourage the root of the abuse. For example, the root of the abuse was mentioned to be power and control. Now, what if you're taught that as a man you're supposed to have power over and control? If you're constantly told that you're supposed to have power and control over your spouse, then you think that's actually the right thing to do. So instead of being told to avoid that, you're being told to do that. I remember brothers coming to me at I don't know if it was at the beginning of the pandemic, a little before, a little after. Andrew Tate was blowing up at the time. And masculinity, and these guys were like, his language is appealing to young guys. Okay. Why? What the heck is wrong with us? That this is, they're killing our masculinity and so on and so forth. What is masculinity? What does the Quran teach us? What does God say to us? Is a man supposed to have authority over a woman in a relationship, in a marriage? Is that what the Quran teaches? I challenge anyone who says that that is what the Quran says to provide me one reference for that, and I'll prove that that is wrong against the Quran. That is wrong, and that's against the Quran. I've heard the words wali. The husband is a wali of the wife. That is an absolute lie. There's no such thing in Islam. It's not in any fiqh book. This is not my personal research and my own ijtihad. I'm not presenting that. I'm saying that find me one risal, any marja, you pick. Show me one line in the chapter on marriage where it says the husband has wilaya over the wife. Nothing. You will not find that language. But I've heard it plenty of times from Molanas. It's absolutely wrong. There's no such thing. That the husband has wilaya. The Quran has a wording that, again, I've seen people abuse and misinterpret and tell people that, this is what you need to have. You need to have authority over your wife. You need to put her in her place. What is that verse in Surah An-Nisa? A beautiful verse that has been destroyed, mutilated, and presented to serve the opposite of what the verse is trying to say. The verse says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Ar-Rijalu qawwamuna ala an-Nisa. They stop there. Ar-Rijal qawwamuna ala an-Nisa. And what's the translation of qawwamun? Oh, they have authority. That's not what qawwam means. Continue the verse, it'll explain what qawwam means. It says, Ar-Rijalu qawwamuna ala an-Nisa bima faddala Allah ba'dahum ala ba'd wa bima anfaqu. It doesn't say you have authority. You can check Al-Mizan from Allamat al-Tawaiq. He goes through a literal discussion of the word qawwam, what the root is and what it means. It means you are responsible to take care of. And then it continues to say in what ways. Bima faddala Allah ba'dahum ala ba'd. What men, some have been given more than others. The ability to take care of women is something that men are not created equal according to the Quran. I don't want to enter that discussion for another time. Earlier in Surah An-Nisa, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses that topic. Taking care of a woman, which we would say would be physically, emotionally, psychologically, caring for someone, showing love, compassion. That's part of it. The physical aspect, taking care of her. That's one area. And then, وَبِمَا أَنفَقُوا, you are financially responsible for her, not authority that controls. I've seen people use religion and say, oh, there's wilaya, and then if she makes any type of funds, if he allows her to work, and I'll get to that in a second, then he gets to control. I've seen guys think religiously they are actually the hero for providing their wife who doesn't work with credit by using their social security number, getting credit, building the credit, and then destroying the credit. And then she is left unprotected. If she wants to even think about it, she's got over $200,000 more or less of debt in her name. She didn't even use any of that. And what is used for that? Again, authority. Never does the Quran say a man has authority over a woman in marriage. That is absolutely wrong, and it is an absolute lie about the Quran saying that and the law saying that. Allah does not say that. Allah does not justify a man feeling that they have authority over a woman. It's not found anywhere in the Quran. It's responsibility. He has a responsibility to care for a woman. The next thing that I would like to address very briefly, again, I'm just touching topics here. One of the biggest obstacles that we have in the religious community is the issue of divorce when it comes to abuse. The way we have made it work in our minds is that divorce is what a husband can do. So a wife is always at the mercy of the husband. She just cannot do that. And then we hear that, oh, there's something called a court divorce, I guess, the wala'i divorce, going and speaking to some scholar, some mu'ammam, some Hawza student, and convincing them of our case, and then hoping that maybe he will give divorce without the husband's consent, because they know he's not going to give consent. And what ends up happening is, when you go to a scholar, the first hurdle is convincing them that there is abuse. Okay. They will try to think this is one of the wrong cases of thinking well of a person. They want to deny any type of abuse. And if you're able to stay and keep your ground and continue discussing that, and hopefully maybe convince them that it's abusive, then the process of a divorce will start. I knew of a case from the UK. I was still in Qom. And this sister was in an abusive relationship for over 10 years. I met the brother. I couldn't tell from his face. It's not written anywhere on his forehead or anywhere else that I could see at least that this guy is abusive. And he gave me a whole bunch of lies that I didn't know. It's like, yeah, my parents are from this part of Iran. He was from the subcontinent. I was like, oh, okay. And they didn't say anything to me until this whole thing erupted, meaning they brought the case to me, and then it turns out all this stuff were a bunch of mumbo jumbo, a bunch of lies. Okay. But the sister, this is the important. The sister was dealing with it for 10 years, and then she seeks help. I put her in touch at the time. I wasn't able to do it myself. I was a student. I needed to seek help from someone who had that type of authority in mujtahid. So I went to someone that I knew, and I talked to him about the situation. And he was someone that was actually, had been to the UK, had some connections there. After the conversations and me helping him also understand that there is abuse, and he was of the type that, alhamdulillah, wasn't pushing for, realized there is abuse, the process of divorce started. A time of a year was given, and he needs to be convinced of what he wants in return for a divorce. So he had a long list of things that he wanted. Now she has to provide, I don't know how much money, because they went through the process of khul. And the way khul works in this mentality is that, okay, he's got to be in agreement. And he has up to a year to do this. If it doesn't work and he can't agree to anything that you're able to do and willing to do, then he's willing to do a wala'i divorce. Okay. And he asked for a whole bunch of stuff. In the end, they did it in that way. But she's lost so much in the abusive relationship. She's the one that works. She makes the money. She has this. Now she has to give a lot of that stuff up too. The way our minds in the community have been wired to understand the concept of divorce and how it works needs to go through a revolution, I believe. At least just based on fatwa, okay? Because I have some concerns about some of the fatawa that are out there. Some of the fatawa that are out there are part of the problem. Not because I'm judging by the result. I'm judging by the process of research. When you do research on the basis of that fatwa, and you look at the verses and the ahadith, you realize that that is not the correct view of Islam. The view of Islam is different. But we work based on ijtihad and taqleed. People are doing taqleed of their maraja. I don't want to encourage anyone to go against that because we can't. That is the process. What I am encouraging is, at a different time, having open discussions about these ideas and what the sources are, what the references are, why this fatwa exists, and debating. I think that should be open for discussion. I think one of the things that Sayyid Fadullah, may Allah bless his soul, I disagree with some of his views on certain things, but one of the great blessings that he provided the community of the followers of the Ahlul Bayt with was having open discussion about these things. Why is it something that has to be behind closed doors? Nobody discusses this, or only if you're a mujtahid you get to talk about this and nobody else has to have a clue. It should not be public discussion. It should not be a public discourse. That's not correct. It should be a public discussion. We should talk about that, and that will hopefully help the process of changing some of these ideas. We've gone through change in terms of fatwa throughout history, and that needs to happen. Again, I believe, based on research, based on the sources, we are ibad of Allah. Allah has created us. He knows how we are. He knows who we are. He's given us laws that work. He's given us laws that will give us a healthy relationship, and He's given us solutions for when there is an unhealthy relationship. God has provided that solution. Even based on the fatwa, it's still more doable than what the communities are implementing. What some of the Hausa students are implementing. For example, another case that I had to deal with. The Maulana told them that since you guys have a child here, I would definitely, even if there's 1% chance of it working out, you should make it work out. I get angry at the person. And he didn't consult me. I sent him a message. I said, you made a big mistake entering this and interfering in this case. You had no idea what was going on. I had given him a few months to see if he's willing to change. She was not up for that change. For another year plus, he's been given 2 years after I have gotten involved, not because I wanted to give him 2 years, but because by the time she came to the point where she's like, okay, let's break this up, it's already been 2 years. And you're like, if it's maybe willing to work, or if he's willing to do this, 1% chance, start the whole process over again. And then he's loving this Maulana because took his side. Maulana doesn't know, but now everything aside, my point is this idea: if there's a child involved, then make it work. Where is that in the Quran? Where is that in the Hadith? That's culture. Nothing but culture. Let me read you some verses of the Quran that say the exact opposite. I'll start with the more difficult one. The verses that talk about separation in the Quran, none of them discuss anything about children and the decision being made considering the children. Not one. Not one. The only thing that the verses say is إِمْسَاكٌ بِمَعْرُوفٍ أَوْ تَسْرِيحٌ بِإِحْسَانٍ. A man is responsible. You either keep her and treat her the way God said, which I outlined very briefly what the verse says, how God says a man needs to treat his wife. If you can't do that, then تَسْرِيحٌ بِإِحْسَانٍ. Let her go with kindness, not with misery, not with difficulty, not charging her. She made all the money, now she has to pay extra because she wants a divorce, she wants out of this. Quran does not say that. إِمْسَاكٌ بِمَعْرُوفٍ أَوْ تَسْرِيحٌ بِإِحْسَانٍ. Multiple times that line is mentioned in the Quran. And The other reference for it, so the only, first reason is the Quran, and by the way, the Risala as well, but I want to cite the Quran. We have forgotten the Quran. Risala, no Risala says from your marja, any marja, pick, you can go and check, I'll bring you the fiqh book, Minhaj al-Salihin of Sayyid Sistani, or Tahlil Wasila of Imam Khomeini, Ayatollah Khamenei, anything, you name it, I'll bring it to you, I'll read you the book. Nobody says, if there's a child involved, then do ABC. No, doesn't work like that. More than that, the Quran has one line very specifically on this. It says, لا تضار والدة بولدها سورة بقرة ولا مولود له بولده. A mother, it starts with a mom. A mother is not going to be harmed because of her child, neither is a father going to be harmed because of his child. Okay. The verse of the Quran makes it very clear. You can't keep a mother, or if it happens a father, in a relationship because of the child. She go through hell because of the child. And that's what people are told. And then scary stories. What is she going to do without her father? Sister, I'm sorry, you got the wrong. This father is not a father you want around your kid. This is not these are all things that people need to be, they need to unlearn. We need to unlearn things because we've been told, the sister mentioned that these are cultural. Yes, they are cultural, but because we're a religious community, we've been told this is religious. Okay. We've been told it's religious. We think it's a sin if we go against it. We think we are the problem and God's going to send us to hell because we asked for a divorce. All these things need to change. Another topic where briefly, I think I have another 10 minutes.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly.
10.
I think I started at quarter till and my 30 minutes. If I'm making a mistake here and the time is shorter, please let me know. Another point that I'd like to mention, and the sister and both sisters I think mentioned something along the lines of the community dealing with those who are seeking help. Let me mention this, that first of all, people should know we need to teach the community. I'm glad one of the last points that Valentina I think mentioned about her, the institution that she works for, which is that they don't make decisions for you. They inform you of your options. Okay? It is very important to learn what those options are. And that's the legal and also the resources that they make available. There may be other organizations I'm not aware. The sister mentioned that there's some South Asian ones. I don't know of these different organizations. I personally don't have these resources. It's nice that there are resources, that I know some people are going through it and they don't know where the resources are. But getting information and on that end of things, and also getting information about what Islam says. It's very important that it's provided. The communities need to provide that. People need to seek that. It works both ways. As people who are asked, we need to make sure we provide valid information. I want to warn us. I've heard plenty of times, I think some of the things that were mentioned, again, from a religious perspective, they were mentioned. Like, oh, you should try to make it work. Where does God say you need to make it work? Okay. When you say you need to make it work, you're putting the burden on the person. Okay, if God put that burden as a religious person, as someone that will do nothing other than what God has said, that's my devotion, that's what my faith is, and I try my best. I hope I don't fail too many times. And I'm definitely not going to encourage anyone to go against that. Okay. If you're saying that that's what they religiously need to do, you better have your material ready on the day of judgment. Okay. Because God's going to ask you, you said, I have said this, where did you get that from? If you don't know, say, I don't know. Don't encourage someone religiously. You want to give your own personal thoughts about something? Oh, that's a different thing. Don't mess with religion. Don't get religion into this, okay? Don't, if it's your personal thought, you just genuinely and sincerely think that's a good idea, and you don't know any better. But don't say God said that unless you know it. If you don't know it, just say, I don't want to mess with this. I don't know. Go ask someone that knows. One of the biggest mistakes or biggest problems that we have, generally on religious topics, but specifically on this issue, is exactly that. People just throw out what they've heard and they say this is what religion says. Nobody is asking for references. Nobody checks for references, qualifications, or any of that. And one last note on that, unfortunately, we have a shortage of people who are actually qualified. Unfortunately, in terms of religion, we live in a desert here, in the West in general. I'm sorry, I'm not speaking of any particular person. I'm probably the worst of all, but from my experience, I think all the dropouts have ended up here. Okay, people who are not very qualified. They can make good bucks just coming here. And I know people who make good bucks with just making up dhikr or dua or something, giving it to people, and make loads of money off of that. Some amam on your head, you can easily start making loads of money. If you were in countries where there are actual ulama around, there would be no room for you. You wouldn't be able to make any type of money. And I hope that is not the reason for any Hausa student delivering anything on Islam to look for money. And that's a shame, unfortunately, that is there. But that was not said to disrespect any of the actual scholars who are serving the communities selflessly, but it was to notify that there are many. Make sure you check the qualifications before you seek advice. And I will end on the note of this last point that I mentioned, that we definitely need a lot more qualified people